Okay, so picture this. You're relaxing at home. It's Christmas Day. You've just finished opening presents. The house smells like pine needles and cinnamon roll. And then, bam, it hits you. You forgot something. Maybe it's batteries for like your nephew's new robot dinosaur. Or maybe you just desperately need a coffee run after all that eggnog. But the question is anything even open on Christmas Day?
Well, we're going to deep dive into that very topic today, thanks to this recent CBS News article that investigated what stores, restaurants, and services are actually operating on December 25th, 2024. So get ready, because we're about to uncover some surprising finds and maybe even bust a few myths about what's open and closed on Christmas Day.
It's funny how we tend to picture Christmas Day as like this total shutdown,
Yeah.
kind of like a retail ghost town.
Yeah.
But the reality is there are still essential services running, and surprisingly, even some non-essential businesses are operating. Yeah, and I think that's what surprised me when I first read this article. Like, I knew some places would be open, but I was caught off guard by like the specifics. Like, for example, we all know the big retailers, Costco, Target, Walmart, they're all closed, right?
Yep, exactly. No last-minute dash for discounted wrapping paper this year. But here's where it gets interesting. The article highlights that Sheetz, the convenience store chain, is staying open on Christmas Day.
Whoa, now I wouldn't have guessed that one. I mean, you think of convenience stores as being there for, well, convenience, but not necessarily a Christmas Day staple.
Yeah, I think it kind of shows how convenience stores are like evolving, Yeah. They're becoming more than just a place to grab a quick snack or fill up your gas tank. And a lot of communities, especially those without like 24-hour grocery stores, they're becoming that go-to for emergency needs, even on holidays.
That makes a lot of sense. So if you suddenly realize you're out of milk or need a last-minute bag of chips for your Christmas gathering, Sheetz might be your unexpected Christmas miracle.
Yeah, exactly. It's a good reminder that even on holidays, there's still a demand for certain goods and services, and businesses are adapting to meet those needs.
Okay, so we've covered the retail giants and the surprise convenience store revelation. Now let's talk groceries. I mean, what if you completely forgot to buy cranberry sauce? Or even worse, you forgot everything for Christmas dinner. Is there any hope?
Well, it's not a complete grocery apocalypse, but it's definitely a mixed bag. A lot of major chains are closed, as you might expect. However, some chains like Acme, Albertsons, Safeway, and Vons do have select locations open, although often with limited hours.
So there's a chance, but you definitely can't just assume your usual grocery store will be open.
Exactly. And here's another thing from the article that caught my eye. Trader Joe's and Whole Foods are closed on Christmas Day.
Wait, really? I would thought those would be the places catering to the last-minute gourmet cheese plate crowd.
Right, but seems even those who prefer organic cranberries will need to plan ahead this Christmas.
Okay, that's good to know, especially for anyone who might be used to those stores being open on other holidays. Speaking of things you might urgently need, let's move on to pharmacies. I mean, Christmas Day is still a day, right? People get sick, accidents happen. What's the situation if you need medication on December 25th?
This is where things get a little tricky. The article says that most major pharmacy chains like Rite Aid are closed on Christmas.
So no quick pharmacy run if you realize you're out of your prescription or someone suddenly comes down with a cold.
Well, not quite. There is some good news. CVS pharmacy locations will be open on Christmas Day, but a lot of them will have reduced hours, so it's really important to check your local listings before heading out.
That's a relief. I mean, it's not ideal, but at least there's an option for those urgent pharmaceutical needs.
And here's another interesting detail. Only 3 giant food pharmacy locations will be open nationwide, and they're all in Maryland.
Wow, talk about hyper-local information. It's almost like a Christmas Day pharmacy treasure hunt for Maryland residents. But I guess that's why it's so important to do your research beforehand.
Absolutely. A little planning goes a long way, especially on a holiday like Christmas.
All right, so we've tackled retail groceries and pharmacies. Now for the question on everyone's mind. Where can we grab a bite to eat on Christmas Day? Fast food restaurants, what's the outlook?
Well, generally speaking, you'll have better luck finding an open fast food place than a sit-down restaurant on Christmas. But as always, it varies greatly depending on the specific location and franchise.
Okay, so let's get specific. What about the big names? McDonald's, Starbucks, Dunkin'. Are we doomed to cook at home even if we burn the turkey?
Not necessarily. The article says that McDonald's plans to have many of its locations open, but with potentially reduced hours, so check before you go.
That's good news for all the McMuffin lovers out there. What about coffee? Are Starbucks and Dunkin' coming to the rescue of those who need a caffeine fix on Christmas morning?
The good news is many Starbucks and Dunkin' locations will be open. However, as with everything else, local variation is key, so it's always best to confirm hours before heading out. Maybe make that Starbucks app your best friend this Christmas.
Right, because who wants to be stuck with lukewarm instant coffee on Christmas morning? Now for the news that probably won't surprise anyone. Chick-fil-A is closed on Christmas Day.
Of course, it wouldn't be Chick-fil-A if they weren't taking a break on a holiday, right? But here's a fun little detail from the article that did surprise me. IHOP will be open on Christmas Day.
Now that is interesting. You wouldn't necessarily think of pancakes as a Christmas tradition. But I guess IHOP is recognizing that maybe some people go crave a short stack, even on December 25th.
It definitely challenges our assumptions about what people want on Christmas Day and shows how consumer preferences are evolving even around traditional holidays.
So if you're dreaming of a Christmas filled with pancakes and syrup, IHOP has got you covered. But again, make sure to check those hours before you go.
Always a good reminder.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. What are the key takeaways for anyone navigating Christmas Day needs this year?
I think the biggest takeaway is that Christmas Day isn't a complete retail and service shutdown, but it does require planning and flexibility. Just because a business typically operates 24/7 doesn't mean it will on Christmas Day.
Right, so while you might be able to grab a burger or a coffee, don't expect to do your full Christmas shopping or grocery haul on December 25th.
Exactly. And this actually brings up a point that's worth considering. Even on holidays, our essential services operate differently. We tend to take these services for granted, but it's important to remember that there are people working behind the scenes on these days to keep things running.
That's a really good point. It's easy to get caught up in our own holiday plans. But it's a good reminder to think about the folks who are working to make our lives a little easier, even on Christmas Day.
Absolutely. And it leads us to an interesting question. How has online shopping and delivery changed our expectations of what should be open on holidays? Do we now assume everything should be available at our fingertips 24/7, even on Christmas?
That's a really thought-provoking question. I mean, it's incredibly convenient to order almost anything online and have it delivered even on holidays. But it also raises questions about the trade-offs between convenience and giving workers time off, especially on a holiday like Christmas.
It's a complex issue with no easy answers, but it's definitely a conversation worth having as we navigate the evolving world of consumerism and the changing nature of work even during the holidays.
Well said. All right, folks, we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our Christmas Day deep dive, but we're not done yet. When we come back, we'll explore the implications of these holiday operating hours a little further, looking at the economic and social factors at play. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to our deep dive into what's open on Christmas Day.
You know, as we were talking about those limited pharmacy hours, it really hit me that while most of us are enjoying the festivities, there are healthcare workers who are still on duty, making sure those urgent needs are met.
Yeah, it's a good point. While we're focused on finding an open coffee shop or a bag of chips, for some people it's about needing critical medication or medical attention.
It really changes your perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Thinking about all the doctors, nurses, EMTs, pharmacists who are working on Christmas Day, making sure those essential services are available.
Absolutely. It says a lot about their dedication and how important they are to our communities, even on holidays.
So while we're checking store hours and planning our Christmas Day errands, it's good to pause for a second and appreciate those who are working behind the scenes to keep things running smoothly.
Right. Well said. Now, shifting gears a bit, I found something kind of interesting in the article about Christmas Day entertainment. Turns out Netflix is streaming 2 NFL games this year.
Wait, really? Football on Christmas Day? That's a pretty big deal, isn't it?
It is. The NFL usually avoids scheduling games on Christmas Day, out of respect for the holiday. So this is a pretty big change.
I wonder why they decided to do that. Could it be because of the growing influence of streaming services and how they're changing our viewing habits?
Yeah.
Even on holidays?
Yeah, it's definitely possible. Streaming platforms have become a major part of the entertainment industry, and they don't have to follow the same scheduling rules as traditional broadcasters.
That's true. And for football fans, having live games to watch on Christmas Day could be a new tradition. Makes you wonder if other sports leagues might do the same thing. Could we see Christmas Day basketball or hockey games in the future?
It could happen. As viewing habits change and the lines between traditional broadcasting and streaming get blurrier, we might see a change in how major sporting events are scheduled, even on holidays.
Okay, so we've talked about stores, pharmacies, restaurants, and even football. But what about the other essential services that we often don't even think about? Things like transportation utilities, emergency services. What's the situation there?
That's a good question. The article doesn't really talk about those specific services, but I think it's safe to assume that essential things like power grids and emergency response systems will keep working.
Yeah, it's one of those things you don't really think about until something goes wrong.
Mm.
Imagine if the power went out on Christmas Day, or there was a major water main break. It would be total chaos.
Exactly. It shows just how important these systems are and how much we depend on the people who keep them running smoothly. 204/7, 365 days a year.
Speaking of things we take for granted,
Yeah.
what about postal service and package delivery? I mean, we're also used to getting those last-minute Amazon deliveries, but what happens on Christmas Day?
Well, the article doesn't specifically mention postal service, but I really doubt that regular mail delivery would happen on Christmas Day.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't think many postal workers would be too happy about delivering holiday cards on Christmas itself.
And as for package delivery, the article doesn't say for sure, but most big delivery companies like FedEx and UPS usually stop regular deliveries on major holidays, like Christmas.
So if you're really hoping for that last-minute package to arrive on Christmas Day, you're probably out of luck.
It's a good reminder to plan ahead and order those gifts early, especially if you're using standard shipping.
You know, thinking about all these businesses that are open and closed on Christmas Day got me thinking about the economic side of things.
That's an interesting point. On the one hand, you've got businesses that decide to stay open and maybe make some money on a day when a lot of their competitors are closed. It's a chance to get ahead.
Then on the other hand, there's the cost of staying open on a holiday, like paying employees overtime or holiday wages. It's a tough decision for businesses, trying to balance making money with those extra expenses.
And then there's the bigger question of consumer spending. Are people more likely to spend money on Christmas Day if their options are limited? Or do they just spend their money on other days instead?
It's a complicated thing with a lot of factors. It would be interesting to see data on how spending habits change around Christmas Day, especially with the rise of online shopping.
I agree. It would be really interesting to see how the balance between in-store and online spending changes on a day like Christmas, and how that affects the overall economy.
Okay, so we've looked at the practical side of what's open and closed, and we've talked about the impact on workers and the economy.
But there's another part of this conversation that I think is worth talking about: the social and cultural side of how we spend Christmas Day.
You're right. It's not just about finding an open store or getting something to eat. It's about how our traditions and values affect what we do on this specific holiday.
Exactly. For a lot of people, Christmas is about family, or religious traditions, or just taking a break from everyday life.
So the idea of going shopping or running errands on Christmas Day might not fit in with those traditional values.
Right. It makes us rethink what this holiday should be about. And it brings up a bigger question. How are our expectations and priorities around Christmas changing in the 21st century?
That's a big question. It's clear that technology, the way we work, and the growing diversity of our society are all affecting how we experience and celebrate Christmas.
Definitely. And this look into what's open on Christmas Day gives us a peek into those bigger cultural changes.
Well said. Okay, everyone, we've covered a lot in this second part of our deep dive, but there's one more really important thing we need to talk about. The people behind these Christmas Day operations. When we come back, we'll look at the experiences of the people who are working on this holiday, exploring their motivations, their challenges, and their perspectives. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the final part of our Christmas Day deep dive. We've talked about the practicalities of what's open and closed. We've looked at the economic side of things and even talked about how people's attitudes towards the holiday are changing. But now, let's shift our focus to something really important, the human side of all this.
Yeah, in all this discussions about what's open on holidays, we often forget about the people who are actually working, their motivations, their challenges, their experiences. That's a whole other side to this story.
Right, because for every open cash register or coffee machine, there's a person who's chosen, or maybe had the choice made for them, to work on Christmas Day. And I think it's important to understand why people make those decisions.
Absolutely. For some, it might just be about the money. They need the extra cash, especially during the holidays. For others, it might be about giving their coworkers who celebrate Christmas a chance to be with their families.
That's a really good point. It shows how strong the community can be in a workplace. But I imagine there are also downsides to working on Christmas Day, even if you're doing it by choice.
Of course. There's the chance you'll miss out on family traditions or religious services, or even just the chance to relax at home. Even if you get paid extra, those are big sacrifices.
And it makes you think about the bigger picture. As a society, Are we becoming too dependent on having things available all the time, even if it means people have to work on holidays?
It's a tough question, but it's something we should all think about as consumers. Are there times when we could skip that last-minute coffee run? Or wait a day to place that online order just to give those workers a break?
That's a good point. Maybe it's about being more aware of what we really need
Yeah.
versus what we just want, especially on a day that's supposed to be about togetherness and being thankful.
Right, and I think it also shows how important it is to support businesses that treat their workers fairly, not just when it comes to pay, but also in terms of scheduling and creating a work environment that respects people's personal lives.
Absolutely. Because in the end, it's about finding a balance. We need to meet the demands of a world that wants things instantly, but we also need to think about the people who make that possible. And as we've seen in this deep dive, that starts with asking questions, being informed,
Yeah.
and making choices as consumers.
Well said. And as we finish up this look at what's open on Christmas Day, I think the most important thing to remember is that there's a human story behind everything, behind every purchase, every open door. And when we understand those stories, we can start to understand the world a little better.
Absolutely. So this Christmas Day,
Yeah.
whether you're staying home or going out, take a minute to think about the people who are working. They're part of what makes our society work, and their hard work deserves our respect. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, and happy holidays, everyone.